What's going on, guys? Today I have come up with a melee Vindicta strategy that is fully AFK. It uses the Blood Pouncer and the Penance aura, so you don't have to worry about upkeeping prayer or looting or anything like that. And this method gets about 33 to 35-second kills. In my opinion, this is easily the best Vindicta method in the game right now. It's better than Necromancy, it's better than Magic, it's probably better than range as well, but range is so expensive it's not even worth using. So yeah, definitely check this method out if you want to get some really fast AFK Vindicta kills. So with the release of the new combat updates, I've been testing out a little bit of melee Vindicta, and I have found a method that I think is honestly ridiculous. So you can see here, I have a Blood Pouncer out, so just a legendary pet, no DPS familiar or anything like that. And I'm also going to be using the Penance aura, just so I'm using as few supplies as possible. And with this method, you're able to get somewhere around 2 to 35-second kills pretty much every single time. There is one little caveat for this method, and that is there's a penguin right here apparently. What? Okay. But there is one little caveat with this method, and that is I don't really know how much you can downgrade from what you see in this video because it's kind of tight how this works. With the DPS ranges, basically what we're doing is doing so much damage up front that we're skipping the first line of fire, and then we're doing so much damage by the end of the kill that it's pretty much killing him before the second line of fire does any damage to us. So like I was saying, if you have any lower gear than what you see here, you might run into a few little problems, especially if you don't get that first set of, or the first firewall skip thing. The other thing to note is I do have all of the enchantments for my gear, and I also have Greater Fury. You probably don't need Greater Fury, but I would highly suggest getting the Gloves of Passage and the Champion's Ring enchantments. These help a lot with increasing your damage for relatively cheap cost. I don't know what these cost right now. They might be kind of expensive, but I already had them. But yeah, they seem to help quite a bit. Moving on to the preset. Before I get any further into the little preset portion though, you definitely should try to get almost everything you see here. If you don't have most of this stuff, this method is definitely not going to work out. You basically have to have a ton of damage in order to make this work, because you have to be getting the phases before the fire lines, right? You have to be able to skip the first fire line and then kill Vindicta before the second fire line does a ton of damage. And yeah, that's just an insane DPS requirement. So yeah, definitely try to be getting most of what you see here before you try this method out. For the relics, you can see it is Persistent Rage, just to regenerate adrenaline in between kills. And then Conservation of Energy and Fury of the Small are both required to just use all of the ultimates that we're using. We're using Berserk as well as Overpower and then a bunch of Threshold abilities. So we're going to need as much adrenaline as we possibly can get. In addition to this, you're also going to need the passive Ring of Vigor from the Extinction quest. That's 100% required as well. For the familiar, you can see it's just a legendary pet. I find at Vindicta it's really nice to use a legendary pet. So often Vindicta dies across the arena, and then either you have to run all the way across the arena to loot, or just let the loot rot on the floor. And if you use a legendary pet, it'll run over and collect all that loot automatically, and it's just a lot easier to use. For the gear setup, you can see it's 3 pieces of the Vestments of Havoc. This is absolutely required. We need to be getting the extended Berserk duration in order to make this work, and the other effects of the Vestment of Havoc are insane as well to regenerate even more adrenaline. So definitely make sure you have all 3 of these. For the gloves, you can see it's the Gloves of Passage. These seem really good for this method. I do have the enchantment on these, but yeah, these gloves seem really good for this method because it gives you a lot of extra bleed damage, and we're using 2 different bleeds, so that's going to give us a pretty significant amount of damage. And you'll see when you do this method, that the rotation is almost perfect to always be using Havoc and then a bleed. So you're like always going to be boosting your bleeds with this. And then it also does just do an additional extra damage, which is nice. You maybe don't need the enchantment for this, but I would for sure try to get the Gloves of Passage themselves. Same thing with the Champion's Ring. Although I would probably try to get the enchantment for this item. It seems really good to give you both the critical strike damage as well as critical strike chance. And since the target is always bleeding, you're always going to be boosting your critical strikes. So the Champion's Ring seems really good for this as well. For the weapons, I use the Abyssal Scourge. This weapon is phenomenal for melee. It's so much better than the main hand Lang. They ruined the main hand Lang when they took away its effect, but I guess it doesn't really matter that much. But the Scourge is really, really good. It gives you a ton of extra damage as well as a free bleed all the time, which pairs really nicely with the Jaws of the Abyss. And for the offhand, I just use a tier 95 Lang. The tier 85 probably works fine as well, and if you don't have either of those, I think even something like a Drygor would probably work out perfectly fine. I don't really think the passive effect, like the Frostblades, really does that much. I mean, it gives you 500 damage for 9 seconds, but it doesn't really activate all that often, and yeah, I don't know, it just doesn't really seem that great. For the cape, I have a Zuck cape. This is absolutely required 100%. The Zuck cape is insane with melee. It hits a 60,000 when we use Chaos Roar and Overpower, so you're absolutely going to need a Zuck cape. Same thing with the Amulet of Souls. The Amulet of Souls just gives you a ton of passive healing, and you absolutely need it. An EOF is obviously better, but you don't need to use that because it's just so expensive. For the helmet, I'm using the Jaws of the Abyss. This is really good, like I said. We're always going to have a bleed on from the Scourge, and then we're also going to have Dismember up for a significant portion of the time. So we're always going to be getting like 4% extra adrenaline for every single basic. So yeah, the Jaws of the Abyss are just really, really good. If you don't have this and you have a vestment hood, I think the 4-piece vestment set also works pretty well for this. But yeah, I don't know. I would definitely just use the Jaws. I think they're better. For the book, I just use a Scripture of Full. There might be other books that work, like the Scripture of Jazz might work. The Scripture of Wen also might work, but I'm not 100% sure on those. The Scripture of Full is definitely the best though. And I would highly suggest trying to get the Scripture of Full just because it has the potential to always be active, whereas the Scripture of Jazz and the Scripture of Wen, they always are going to have a cooldown. So yeah, the Scripture of Full is definitely the best, but you could try out a Scripture of Jazz if you don't have this one. For the inventory, it's a very basic inventory. You can see it's just potion reservoirs and some overloads and then some emergency food and then pretty much just the spring cleaner and the Excalibur. You also are going to want to have the abyssal armor spikes. You don't need alloy or anything like that, and you can also wear these because the Nexus doesn't do anything for us. That's just if you want to bring darkness, I guess, but yeah, you could just wear the abyssal armor spikes. But the abyssal armor spikes seem pretty decent for this, just to give you an additional bleed sometimes. I don't think these are actually required though, if you like don't want to use these, I guess, but I think any little bit of damage probably helps. The final thing to note is the perks. For the most part, it's just standard best in slot perks for your gear, but on my offhand Lang, I do actually have Lunging 4, Eruptive 2. This perk seems really good if you want to get it for some reason, but I think Aftershock would probably work if you don't want to re-perk your gear or whatever. But Lunging 2 or Lunging 4 seems really, really good because you're using Dismember twice per kill. You're actually boosting your Dismember damage pretty significantly with this, and I think it's better than having Aftershock. But like I said, it's probably not that big of a difference, and Aftershock probably works perfectly fine as well. But yeah, if you do want to put Lunging on, it does seem a little bit better. Alright guys, so you can see I am here at the entrance to Vindicta, and like I said, I have the Blood Pouncer here, and then the Penance Aura on as well, and that's just to use as few supplies as possible. And the only buffs you need for this method are going to be Soul Split and Turmoil. So just turn those on, make sure you're overloaded and your book is on, and then enter the instance. And all you do when you enter the instance is just kind of surge over this way and then kind of try to get towards the center of the arena. Like this is the ideal-ish square right here. The Vindicta will instantly hit you, but it doesn't really matter where you stand as long as you're in the center of the arena. But like you can see, we immediately Zerk and then we use Chaos Roar and Overpower and it hits 60,000 damage. And that 60,000 damage will, we use that to basically phase Vindicta before it does the smoke line thing. And it happens every single time as long as you don't get like a relentless proc or something weird to happen. But like you can see, Vindicta will fly away and then you pretty much kill it immediately after that happens. Sometimes you'll kill it before it flies, sometimes you'll kill it after. But like you can see, it doesn't really matter that the smoke line comes out because you kill it before it like does any damage to you. And then you can move your character back into position over here if you want, or you can pretty much just stay anywhere in the center of the arena. If your character's like on the edge or something like that, like on these edges of the arena, I would try to move back to the center just because it takes 8 seconds for Vindicta to hit you rather than 4, which is kind of annoying. But it's really not that big of a deal. But one other thing to note is if your HP is really low after a kill ends, like if you like get really bad hits or something and you get hit by the smoke a little bit, just use the Excalibur or eat a shark or whatever that Vindicta drops, and you should be fine. But like you can see here, these kills are insanely fast, and 33 seconds, 34 seconds, it's just super fast. And as you can see, I use the legendary pet because a lot of the times Vindicta will die and then drop the loot like across the arena, so the legendary pet is really nice. But yeah, I'll just speed up some kills here just to show that this works, and yeah, it gets some insanely fast kills. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you guys, if you do have the gear for this method, you test it out, because I think it's actually a pretty crazy method. I mean, look at Vindicta back there, just ripe for the picking. And yeah, no. But if you guys made it this far in the video, definitely drop a like on it. It really does help promote the channel. And hopefully you guys are having some fun with these new combat style updates. I know it's been Necromancy for a very long time, and it's kind of nice to be able to use something else. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one.